Good morning, colleagues from the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sports, and good morning to Minister Murray, who's joining us online. Welcome to the Standing Committee meeting on Cultural Affairs and Sports, where we will be discussing and conducting our deliberations on the Western Cape Appropriation Bill, Cultural Affairs and Sports, and that's vote 13 for this department. My name is Gillian Bosman and I'm the chairperson of this committee. I'm now going to ask that our members please introduce themselves.
Morning Speaker, Gerrit Pretorius. Morning Chair. You must forgive me, thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson, Deirdre Bartman.
Much. Members online, could you please introduce yourselves?
Good morning, Chairperson, members in the department. My name is Mesuli Kama, member of the committee. And Chair, I received a call from Member Barnes that she will be joining late. She's at the doctor with her daughter. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Member Kama. Are there any other members online?
Good morning, Chairperson and everyone else in the chambers. The Member Kasim is also online. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to you, Member Kasim. I'm now going to hand over to the department and ask the departmental officials online to please introduce themselves. I think we can start with the Minister. I can see an AM. Minister.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Unfortunately, my device does not want me to show my face this morning. But I'm Honourable Marais, and welcome to all the new members to our wonderful committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other other officials online?
Good morning, Chair. It's Herman van der Westhuizen. I'm the head of the Minister's office.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Dion Burger from the HOD's office. Thank you.
Morning. Are there any other members online or officials that I have not seen?
Good morning, Chair. Member Van Vogel online.
Goeiemorgen, baie welkom. We will now then go over to one more introduction.
Good morning, it's Rihanna Ghani, Chairperson of Heritage Western Cape.
Very warm welcome to you, ma'am. What we'll now do is we'll hand over to, I was about to say members of the ruling party on my right, but for today you will be. We'll hand over to the department, starting with the HOD.
Good morning, Chair. Guy Redman, HOD DCAS. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Brenda Ratchkes, Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning, members. My name is Jane Steeman Moleleki, and I'm the Director for Arts, Culture and
Good morning, members. My name is Carol van Wyk. I'm the Chief Director, Cultural Affairs. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Lyndon Bauer, and I am the Chief Director for Sport and Exchange.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Thabo Tutu, Director Sport Promotion.
Good morning, Chair and members. Michael Janssen van Rensburg, Director, Museums, Heritage and Geographical Names, and CEO for Heritage Western Cape.
Morning, everyone. Jackie Bull from the Youth and After School Program Office.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Pilasande Matsuli, Deputy Director Recreation, Acting Director for Sport Development.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Nomaza Dingayo. I'm the Director for Western Cape Archives and Record Service. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Cecilia Sani. I am the Director for Library Service.
Good morning, Sean Dilly, Director Strategic and Operational Management Support.
Thank you very much for all those introductions. May I ask the gentleman in the back if you could also introduce yourselves, please?
Morning to everyone. My name is Neba Sandlana, the Chairperson of Guguletu Sport Council. We are here just to observe, to listen. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Raymond Pinar. I'm also from the Guguletu Sports Council. We're just here to listen and learn a few things. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome to you. I just want to check, do you guys have a copy of this?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll make sure that you have a copy. And another reminder to members and everybody online that this is also a public hearing. So if there are any questions that you have to the department, we will have an opportunity towards the end for you to pose those questions. And this section contains how the department is planning to spend the money that has been appropriated for it in the budget. What we can also try and do before you leave, if you'd like a copy, we can get you a copy of the annual performance plans of the department as well. But if you've got your details on the register, we will make sure that you get that. We like having members of sports and cultural councils at these meetings, because sometimes it's rather boring with just politicians. So it's always good to have outsiders. Members, I'd like to start off by just asking you to please close your eyes and just take a moment of silence to mourn the passing of Mr. Michael Maas, the former CEO of the Artscape Theatre, and the person that really led the transformation of the Artscape Theatre from what it was as an apartheid institution into an institution that supports the work of arts and culture development in this province. So if you'll indulge me to please just take a moment of silence to celebrate his life. Thank you very much. Members, I have received no apologies except the apology from Member Barnes, who will be joining us later. I also do have a note that the Minister will be leaving us slightly earlier, but we will make sure that any questions for the Minister is taken in the first 30 minutes of the meeting. So if you could just make a note of all of that, but the HOD and his team will be here for the rest of the day to answer all of the other questions that we have. Just a reminder as well to members that we are operating this meeting in the hybrid fashion. So there are members in the chambers as well as members joining us virtually via Microsoft Teams. And in order to make sure that we operate smoothly, members who are online are requested to use the raise your hand function if they'd like to raise any points of order, or if they'd like to sort of participate in the discussion, and we will make sure that we take questions from both sides sort of equally. As I said earlier, we are here to discuss Vote 13, Cultural Affairs and Sports, in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriations Bill of 2023. And as I mentioned, that these meetings, when it comes to appropriations, are considered public hearings, and there will be an opportunity for public input. So if there are any members of the public here, we will give them an opportunity if they have, and if there are any members online. But what I do ask is that as the meeting progresses, if you can just give us an indication if you do have a question, so that we can schedule that just to make sure. We are also going to today give an opportunity for, if there's people who are online from outside, to also answer questions. So members, I'm going to start off by handing over to the Minister and then to the HOD for any opening remarks, and then we'll go straight into the Blue Book.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to mention that we are in the business of bringing hope to the people of the Western Cape. And we bring hope through creating safe spaces of connectedness through our libraries, theatres, museums, and sport facilities. And we also bring hope through creating work experience opportunities for our youth especially. And we bring hope through showcasing people who have worked hard and reached success despite their circumstances. And we believe that this budget will bring hope and joy throughout the province and also sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Over to you, HOD.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning, Chairperson and members of the Standing Committee. Morning to Minister and members of the public and Western Cape Government colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you an overview of the 23-24 final appropriation. The DCAS budget decreased from an adjusted appropriation of 938 million in the 22-23 financial year to a final appropriation of 895 million in the 23-24 financial year, resulting in a net decrease of 42 million. The decrease is mainly attributed to a 30 million allocation for the Netball World Cup, which is not made in this year, in the financial year 22-23, and a once-off earmarked allocation of 16.4 million received in 22-23 for the virtual and digitization services in the Western Cape Provincial Archives. And that allocation is not made this year because we've now concluded with the procurement of those digital scanners. Chair, DCAS's programs are based on an early intervention approach in which the department aims to broaden access to protective factors and to intervene early on in people's lives in order to put them on a path to becoming productive citizens. The outcomes of these interventions relate to the following departmental policy objectives, which we've outlined in our APP. They are creating a shared future and a sense of belonging, which is social cohesion, giving youth a sense of purpose and pathways to become productive citizens, and also looking at new ways of working and looking at new operating models. To this end, I would just like to mention a few budget highlights. Within the context of creating a shared future and a sense of belonging, we have made significant contributors to our libraries. Libraries have been said to be great equalizers in combating the digital divide as well as the information divide. The final appropriation for the 2023-24 financial year includes additional funding to library services in an amount of 26 million over the 2023 MTF for B3 municipalities and 5.5 million over the 2023 MTF to replace the book collection and the furniture in the Beaufort West Library, regional library building, which was destroyed by a fire in November 2022. The additional funding for B3 municipalities is welcome because it will fund the shortfall currently experienced by these municipalities, mainly due to rising inflation. Also, Chairperson, ulwaluko lufanele ukuba libe yintokozo okanye libe ulonwabo kusapho kodwa kule minyaka embalwa edlulile kwi-province yethu nezinye i-provinces eSouth Africa bekungekho njalo. And an additional 9.4 million was received to effectively implement the Customary Initiation Act. The focus will be improving governance of the customary initiation practice and also to prevent debts. We cannot have debts in this very important and wonderful rite of passage. Funding in the amount of 2 million was also received to unlock learner creativity. With this funding, 25 artists will be appointed to work with classroom teachers to teach arts and culture in these in 3 districts, Cape Wineland, Central Karoo, and West Coast. And over the past 7 months, we've seen major sporting events in the Western Cape, and they've demonstrated their contribution to bringing people together, as well as contributing to the economy, especially in the tourism sector and along the entire value chain. 6 million has been allocated for the Cape Town E-Prix in the 2023-24 financial year. And then within the context of giving youth a sense of purpose and pathways to become productive citizens, and following the development of the norms and standards for Western Cape Government youth programs, the budget has been aligned to strengthen DCAS's service offering to youth at risk by providing protective factors. We have received an allocation of 158.7 million for youth programs over the MTF. In terms of the EPWP program, we are also excited with the additional 7 million that was received to grow the EPWP program in the 23-24 financial year in the areas of arts, culture, museums, heritage, archives, and library services. This funding provides an opportunity to create additional work opportunities for unemployed youth in the Western Cape. Chairperson, we table the DCAS 23-24 budget and an annual performance plan for your consideration and to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HID. It is really good to know that in the Western Cape, every weekend there is a sporting or cultural event taking place in this province. And every time I go to any of those or I see publicity around it, you see a Western Cape government logo. And a lot of it goes because of the hard work of the people in this room and in this department. And it's very sad that this is the smallest budget in the entire Western Cape government, but the input and the output of what the work of this department is felt across the province. And we've seen that, whether it's libraries in Plettenberg Bay or libraries on the West Coast, or whether it's going to after-school game-changing hours in Saldanha Bay. We've seen the impact of this department, and I made a joke with Ms. Moleleki earlier that we should just give some of the other departments' budget to DCAS, because we know that DCAS will do much more. And I'm grateful that there's an increased focus on youth development in this department, because the minister did commit in this room that the province will be, this department will be taking charge of the provincial youth development strategy, which I think is so needed. Just a reminder to members and to members of the public at large, this Saturday is also one of those cultural events taking place in Cape Town, with the Cape Town Carnival happening as well. So hopefully next year or the year, in 3 years' time, the department will be taking that carnival to another town outside of the metro as well. I think George is quite ripe for a nice community carnival. I'd certainly like to go to that. Colleagues, the budget as well as the APPs have been tabled for your consideration. Just to manage things, if we could take a round of questions starting on pages 673 to 685, inclusive of the opening remarks from the Minister as well as the HOD. Starting off, I see Member Kasim and then Member Bartman. Member Kasim, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. Also, thank you for the report. My question is rather directed in terms of the library services. Are there any plans for funds to be allocated to possible pop-up libraries in farming areas or informal settlements which are far from community libraries? Because in most cases, these kids need to walk to another community to finish school projects or simply just for the fun of reading. So is there any plans to establish possible pop-up libraries in farming areas or informal settlements, whether it's in a container which can be made into a library as well? Because it's critical that we have these programs in areas which are far, like I mentioned, farming areas and informal settlements, where it's difficult for children to make use of libraries, or, like I said, simply for project purposes or for reading purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, firstly, on page 676, I just want to say thank you to the department for putting the 5.5 million rand aside for the Beaufort Library that burned down last year. I did a motion in the House last, and it really was quite traumatic on the community when it happened at the time. And I also just want to find out if there's been an investigation and if there's been an outcome of the investigation of what happened. I remember that week, the fire went up, people were in the streets, and no one really knew what exactly happened. So maybe if the department just has some more information with us, or if we could maybe follow up with SAPS if there's no extra information. But just thank you so much. I think the people of the Karoo would really appreciate it. And then I just want to find out, same page, regarding the Mzansi Golden Economy Strategy that will be receiving 2 million rand. I just understand how it will be implemented and how the artists will be able to access this particular program. And then in terms of the 7 million rand for the EPW program that will be assigned, I wanted to find out in those particular areas that were mentioned, what type of jobs will those be, and how many jobs will the 7 million rand be supporting? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Member Windvogel, then Member Maree and Member Kama.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on page 676, bullet point 8. I just want to check with the department what progress has been made with regards to the implementation. What have happened with regards to implement this act in the Western Cape, and what role is the department playing in this, and what engagements have been held with the department or local government. And lastly, when will the House of Traditional Leaders be established in the province? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Murray.
Thank you ever so much, Chairperson. I want to come a bit home to what really moves me in politics. You know, I listened to a speech by Nelson Mandela at the United Nations, and he said, my attitude towards you is going to be your attitude towards my struggles. My struggle is that the colored people are left behind, the Khoi, the Griqua, culturally are left behind. My attitude towards this government is going to be what their attitude is towards us. Now, I want to know how many of the books you're going to buy to be in the library of school libraries or wherever has been written by colored writers. How many? So that we can have a viewpoint as to our own struggle, and that our youth must be made aware of that. I also want to know, in terms of customary initiation programs to prevent deaths, what about the customary initiations and ceremonies by the Griqua and the Khoi? Will they receive finance too? Can the Griqua, Royal House and convention organizations expect to get from that money to celebrate their customary programs or not? Or is that only for Nguni tribes? And then I want to know the EPW, where you added 7 million. Are you making sure that foreigners staying here, coming from Zimbabwe and Mozambique and other provinces, do not benefit from EPWP programs, and it is only for people who are citizens of South Africa or who are resident here? Can you give me such assurances? What are your attitudes in terms of culture towards the Khoi, Griqua, and the San communities?
Thank you very much. Member Kama, and then Member Pretorius, and then we'll close with that round.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I beg your indulgence. I was kicked out by network. Are we doing up until 680?
685.
685. Okay, thank you very much, Chair. My first question, Chair, would be on page 673 around the allocation itself. And I think, Chair, we have repeated this view that this department is underfunded if you look at the the expectations that we have in terms of the role that it must play. And yet the department today presents a budget to this committee which has decreased by over 42 million. Can the MEC give us details of the engagements you would have had with Provincial Treasury regarding the need to increase this budget? And perhaps if we can get an understanding of what motivation was put forward and the response of the Treasury. And in that, if we can get as to how does this decrease impact on the department's ability to deliver the said mandate. And the second question, Chair, around the vision, which is on 673. The department says that it wants to create a socially inclusive, creative, active, and connected Western Cape. And I understand, Chair, the calls or the different groups that would be fighting for social inclusivity and all that and protection of their cultural rights. But I want to check with the department because even here in this Western Cape legislature, where the situation where a member of the House referred to ourselves who are Africans as foreigners, and that we are coming from Zimbabwe, and if racism can be experienced even inside parliamentary chambers, it clearly shows that the province has a serious challenge of racism. So the question would be, what are the programs that the department will be running through this budget to tackle racism in the province and dispel the many distortions even around the Khoi and Sen communities, and how much is budgeted for that? On 678, Chairperson, around the education, skills and health, priority 3, there's it says a large portion of the department's budget is spent on the provision of library services and the purchasing of library material in support of improving literacy outcomes. On page 47 of the APP, under the subject policy trade-offs, it is said that library service will not be expanded in the form of new libraries being built, and as a result, on page 78, Chairperson, the APP of the APP, we see that 2 libraries are planned for the year and will be the last. I therefore wish to understand the following: whether the 374 libraries are enough for the province, and perhaps get an understanding of what informed the decision to stop building new libraries in the province. And in that, Chair, I want to check because there are many other libraries that would have been destroyed, whether through fires or protest actions. And I therefore want to check whether all those libraries that would have had fires or were destroyed because of protest actions are going to be refurbished, or are there libraries that were built? Because I know, for example, of a library in Ceres where it was vandalized and destroyed, I think, about 5 years back, and it has been sitting like that, and the area does not have a library. But we hear now that there was a motion just last year, if I heard correctly, about the library in the Central Karoo, and already there's a 5 million rand that has been allocated to that library. And does it mean, Chair, that the department is not going to do any further expansion of libraries? Because I'm thinking of a Lady Smith library that we recently visited, where it's just too small. It does not even have air conditioning and all of that. It is not conducive even for reading and learning. So what does this decision mean, that we're not going to continue to do these expansions, and up until when? And then Chair, I think that is my last question in these pages. No, sorry, Chair, let me ask one more on 683. Sorry about that. On the case for sports. It says the research showed that sport and recreation make a substantive and significant contribution to the socio-economic development of the province in real terms. So how is this budget responding to the findings and recommendations of this research report? And which of the recommendations have been implemented and which ones are not implemented? When can we expect the department's budget to increase in response to case for sport? And principally, how has this case for sport research influence changed in the delivery of service in the department? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Member Kama. Member Pretorius.
Thank you, Chairperson. Not Speaker this time. Chairperson, I refer to priority 2 on page 677, paragraph 3, the recreation program, mass participation, opportunity and access, etc., etc. Chair, in a previous life, I was privileged to represent a municipal ward in George. It was a vastly rural ward. There are many, many children who are bused to schools from those rural areas, either to George or to actually Great Break River Secondary School. Those school buses run in the mornings and they run after school. Those learners don't have any opportunity whatsoever to participate in extramural activities after school unless there is transport. So the crux of my question today is about transport. It's ironic that there's that in the third piece there is opportunity and access. Access to what? Opportunity to what? And that is what's unfortunate. I respectfully refer to these youngsters as forgotten people, and we cannot allow that to happen in a modern South Africa, and we cannot allow that to happen in this province and in a town like George, where within a radius of 30 kilometers, people cannot access opportunities. They cannot. In fact, I'll go as far as saying that you are doomed to become a farm worker. So if you don't have access to opportunities, and by that I mean transport, you are doomed. And my question is, Chair, is the department working, and obviously this is multifaceted, that we have a Go George system in George, it's been rolled out. In fact, when it was rolled out in the farming area, the taxis stopped running there. And it was replaced with nothing, because that phase of Go George hasn't been rolled out. So whereas people previously had access, they now have no access. There's no public transport because the taxi is not allowed to run there. So my question, Chair, is the department working with other departments and in ensuring that the youth and learners have access to opportunities in towns, be it Oudtshoorn, Beaufort West, George, wherever, to make use of those opportunities? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That was quite a full round, so I'll now hand over to the Minister and the department.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to mention one thing, that all our programs enhances social inclusivity. And then I'm just going to leave it at there. And then I also will hand over to our HOD to answer the rest of the question or allocate some of the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's quite a number of questions. So our Director of Libraries will take all the library-related questions. And then Dr. Bowo will take the case for sport question, and we will tackle the after-school question together with Jackie Poole. And then I will cover the traditional and Khoisan leadership-related questions. And then Ms. Nleleki will cover the Mzansi's Golden Economy and the Artisan Schools program. And I will try and just provide some context around the infrastructure programs in the library space, and then Cecilia will supplement. So, Chair, I'll start with the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act. Whilst DCAS has an interest in the work of the Commission on Khoisan Matters, the responsibility for traditional and Khoisan leaders is located in the Department of Local Government. And this is the practice throughout the whole of South Africa in all the provinces. Other provinces have got the provincial COCTA departments. We have a Department of Local Government, which after the work of the Commission, within the next 2 to 3 years, will, depending on the outcomes of the work of the Commission, have a component for traditional affairs. In the current MTEF, the Department of Local Government, which would be Vote 14, has activated Program 4, which is traditional and institutional management, and they've already made an allocation of 6.3 million over the MTEF. And this amount will obviously shift as and when the outcomes of the work of the Commission on Traditional and Khoisan Leaders is completed. So within that context, most of the work and the recognition and related activities will be led by the Department of Local Government and not by Department of Cultural Affairs, as those are governance-related issues. And we will still have our facilities in the Cultural Commission to work with traditional and cultural groups as we currently do. That will continue unaffected. And then the initiation within Western Cape, the funding that we've provided is for all forms of customary initiation in the Western Cape in terms of this Act. It does not discriminate. It is for customary initiation in terms of the Act. The Act was not in place. It has just recently come in place, and the Act requires of the Western Cape government to have certain structures in place to ensure a safe rite of passage. One of those is the appointment by the Premier, as required by the law, of a Provincial Initiation Coordination Committee. That body has representation from the National House of Traditional Leaders, from SALGA, Department of Community Safety, Department of Health. It's a functional structure that looks at the coordination of initiation and ensures that all the necessary processes must be followed in terms of the Act, whether it is allocation of sites by local authorities for initiation and the relationship between landowners and traditional leaders or initiation forums. All of that is very well spelled out in the Act. Our budget is going to ensure that we bolster our monitoring capabilities so that we're able to be preventative in our approach and identify challenges early on in order to prevent deaths. Those of you who appreciate Ulwaluko, nobody should die through initiation. So we are making sure that that does not happen. And this money is a significant increase to what we've had allocated to this program because we now are having a very clear law with clear directions as to what our responsibilities are. So it will cover all cultures that undergo customary initiation in terms of the Act. The EPWP program is a program that is governed by I think they are called just forgotten, it's the guidelines, basically. It's yes, the determination. So we stick strictly with that. All the people who participate in the EPWP program have to submit their personal details. These personal details are checked against a national database, and we have to record all of the details of the people that are participating in our program in the national database, which is linked to Home Affairs and all of that. So we work strictly within the guidelines of what is currently provided for that program. With respect to infrastructure in libraries, just some quick context. So the building that burned down in Beaufort West was not a public library. It was a our head office or distribution center from which we distribute all the books allocated to the region. So that's where the books come in and go out. And it was not a public library. So right now, that entire region does not have a distribution center, and the distribution center is a very important part of our network to ensure that services are delivered efficiently. We do have some of the libraries, the municipalities are stepping in to begin to rebuild. But the budget that we have at our disposal, if you look at our budget, the bulk of it is coming from the conditional grant, which is a national conditional grant. And that the status of that conditional grant is like all other conditional grants across the country, is very precarious. A significant part of that conditional grant goes into the funding of warm bodies who are working as librarians, library assistants, etc., within the municipal space. And that we prioritize. There is within the grant framework and allocation that is meant to be for infrastructure. However, whenever you engage in a conversation with a local authority with respect to building more infrastructure for libraries, it is not only about bricks and mortar. You must have upfront the resources to then fund the warm bodies that will maintain and operate that library. Most of our municipalities don't have those resources, and those resources will then need to come from the conditional grant, which, as we've shown in our APP, that the amounts that have been allocated within that conditional grant have basically either stagnated or reduced, and we took a very big cut in the 21 financial year after the COVID-19, but we still haven't recovered to pre-COVID period. So what we prioritize most within this conditional grant is the warm bodies, because we do not want people to lose their jobs. And then whenever we have funding for additional infrastructure, we then construct modular libraries, smaller libraries that can work also in informal settlements and other smaller communities. We also have started a program now within our MOD program to have the regional libraries allocate books to be made available to children within the MOD centers, which are located in schools. So we are looking at creative ways of getting smaller kinds of libraries out. If you look at Stofskral and all of the small towns out in the West Coast, all of them have got a much smaller library, which, what do we call it, Willy wagons, which are smaller libraries which are more versatile, that can be moved from place to place and can service a small community. And it's a more agile type of service. So we are able to do that and doesn't require significant infrastructure cost. I'd now like to hand over to Cecilia to cover the other library-related questions. She'll be followed by Ms. Mleleki and then Jackie Bull and then Dr. Bowe. Yeah.
Thank you, HOD. Good morning, Chair and members. So the first one about the pop-up libraries. Yes, that is our service delivery model. So across the province, wherever we could maybe not provide a service through a proper library, where we can't build a library, we work with the municipality to either have little willy wagons, which HOD referred to, which is a willy wagon full of books, which is kept in a church hall or anywhere in that community, and then it's serviced twice or three times a week for the community to use. We also have smaller modular libraries. So we work with the municipalities to identify the areas where there is no service at all and see what kind of service we can give, even if it's through joining up with the school and providing some books in the school. So the reason for Beaufort West is not officially been made known yet. We've not had the final report, but it does seem to point at load shedding and electrical faults. So the load shedding caused a short in the electricity of the building, and that is what caused the fire. But we're waiting for the final report from the SAPS to confirm that. With regards to the authors and whether we do buy the books of especially the colored authors. So our collection development and selection policy allows or asks us to buy more than 60% local authors only. So our collection mainly focuses on local authors. So we do try and buy as much of all our local authors as possible, as according to our collection development policy. So you should be able to find those books in our public libraries. And then maybe just to expand on what HOD spoke about with the infrastructure, the two libraries that we're saying that we're building, although we're saying we're not expanding, is two existing library service points. So it's where there's very small container libraries and we're building bigger libraries, bigger modular libraries in those areas. But unfortunately, the infrastructure budget of the conditional grant does not allow us enough to build a proper new new library service point, which then requires new staff, new books, new everything, which we just don't have the budget for that, but we do try through the other services which we mentioned, the modulars, the wheelie wagons, the schools, to try and get our services to all the community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would respond to the question on page 676. The Mzansi Golden Economy Strategy is a national strategy, a strategy that has been developed by the National Department of Arts and Culture, which aimed at creating sustainable job opportunities for artists within the sphere of arts, culture, and heritage. And to give effect to that particular strategy, we've developed a artists in school program in the Western Cape, which aimed at assisting teachers in transferring artistic skills or unlocking the artistic potential within learners. These schools are in the West Coast region. It is in the Winelands and Central Karoo, but it's mainly at schools where they don't have arts as a subject. So we do it through the life skills programs within the particular schools. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So just two things in relation to the comment around the learners that you made. I think the first thing is that one of the things that DCAS has started doing is working very closely with WCED to run a program called At Home, Year Beyond At Home program. And what that does is put young unemployed people into communities to work with children on farms, in the streets, in community hubs, at churches, you know, wherever children gather, because we know that not all children can stay at school, and that we need to be doing activities where the children are, not just where the schools are. So that's, so just in relation to that, and that program was piloted in George last year and is rolling out more into a slightly bigger program in the George area, but also expanding to a number of other areas. Its biggest footprint is in the Cape Winelands, but we are expanding into all the other districts now. So that is just one response to that. And the other response in relation to that is that Transport for Learners is organized by WCED. So WCED does the transport routes. So if we want learners to remain at school, it has to be negotiated with the bus company tenders, which are put out by WCED. And the sports colleagues work very closely with WCED wherever there is after school programs and there's a cluster of schools and we can move a whole route. That's what you have to do, is you have to move a whole route.
Thank you very much, Chair. So there were three questions. I'll just pick up on the bus one with George. We do work very closely with WCED. We engage with the principals in the affected areas, and what we then try to do is to, as Ms. Bull said, to change the cluster of the route. It's not always easy because it depends on the route and the traffic thereof. We also work very closely to ensure that those children receive nutrition. And that's also a very important part. So it's both the transport and the nutrition that we always have to negotiate with the principals and the WCED about as well. Then, in terms of the some of those children may also be part of the farm worker community, and we actually do have a very strong farm worker base. At this stage, we're pleased to report that last year, February, we hosted a farm worker conference, which Minister Marais attended together with civil society. At that particular conference, a number of resolutions were taken, and during the course of 2022, farm worker committees were established in each of the 6 districts of the Western Cape. The department led this with Mr. Tutu and also with the sport councils themselves so that we can have civil society involved with it. What we are planning to do is that we want to have leagues in the various districts, and we will be piloting 2 of these districts in this particular year, because we don't want to just have a farm worker league in itself. We also want a farm worker league to become part of mainstream. Otherwise, a farm worker would not be able to develop his or her skills in a particular area. So we are working with the Farm Workers Commission of the Western Cape Provincial Sport Confederation, and we are also intending to, in this financial year, to have training programs with the farm worker committees as well. So as they identify the need to have capacity building and other aspects, because later on those farm worker committees must have the opportunity to apply to Lotto, but you cannot apply to Lotto if you don't have AGM minutes, audited financial statements, etc. So we need to build their corporate governance, not only their skills base. So we are covered in that one, and we're working very hard to ensure that. The third question for sport was related to the case for sport from Member Karma. And in this regard, we have a close relationship with the University of the Western Cape. It's a longitudinal study that started in 2012. And in 2015, the first report was given. And in 2016, we were able to receive additional funding from Treasury based upon the contents of the report. We have most of the recommendations have in fact been taken up by us and civil society. One of the important things of having an annual study that is longitudinal in nature is that the university, Professor de Koning and others, accompany us when we meet all the federations. And in this regard, we meet about 145 federations that we transfer to. We meet them in February and January. And in fact, today, the staff members are meeting with the last 10 to 15 federations that did not meet us when we were on the road. We're meeting them virtually today. Around about 10:30, the staff members are doing that. What we then do is that we monitor what they've indicated. If they've indicated they only had 2 female members or they only had 1 member with a disability, we will then keep them to that they need to improve in that regard for the following year, and that is what we then monitor. So there's been a number of those recommendations that we as the department have used to make sure that we have evidence-based decision-making when we have to make decisions relating to sport and recreation. The next case for sport report was 2018, and then the next one will now be this year in September in 2023, so that 2023 will then take the learnings from COVID and also the drought that was 2017 to 2019, because Chair may recall that when the drought happened, we had to stop leagues because some of the pitches are water-based and astroturfs, etc. So those learnings, both from the drought as well as from COVID, will now be taken into account, because of course that has also increased expenditure, but it has also created opportunities for technology to come into play as well. So once we get that report from the university in 6 months' time, we would then be able to analyze that and then see what changes we would then need to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few that, just to close up. Member Kama asked about the budget and how did we motivate and how will this decrease affect our ability to deliver our services. I'd just like CFO to just provide some context on the decrease and why we are registering a decrease. But in terms of our case, I think DIC has made a very strong case within the MTech process for social protective factors. And most of the increased allocations or new allocations we received were fundamentally as a result of the case that we made. The key areas that we led with were youth and libraries and initiation. Youth in its broader sense, so not just the youth program, but the context of being this particular cohort being under the most stress within our communities and requiring activities that can crowd out some of the social challenges that they experience. And we believe DCAS is the best placed to provide that alternative to some of the choices that they are making. And we were then given additional funding to address matters relating to youth at risk. So we are quite comfortable with that. Of course, we would have loved to get more. We believe that if DCAS is well resourced, there will be less need for health to deal with some of the challenges that health deals with. But it's a fundamental shift in approach that Western Cape government would need to make to appreciate that the budget is going to continue to decrease. That's what the future looks like. But the challenges at the hospitals and the number of clients they will receive will continue to increase. So the right way to deal with this is go back to the source. What is causing these? Why are youngsters presenting with stab wounds and gunshot wounds at the age of 20 to 25? Because no intervention is being made 5 years earlier when they are 15 years old. So we are saying if DCAS is resourced well, and those 15-year-olds right now are being well taken care of, at age 20, which is only in 5 years' time, when they are making these hard choices, they are better placed to make better choices, rather than what we are now seeing, that they are the ones holding the guns to our heads, because we have not made those investments much earlier. So it's a fundamental shift to say we need to focus more on closing the tap rather than mopping, which would mean taking taking money away from these departments that are currently under pressure right now, because they are dealing with the symptoms of interventions that of things that are going wrong much earlier, and things that are meant to be addressed by other departments. So health is not responsible for healthy lifestyles, DCAS is. So resource DCAS to make sure that people change their behavior towards healthy lifestyles so that they are not presenting at hospitals. That is a shift that needs to be made, and that is the case that we made. And with respect to initiation, our case was very strong. We've always had around 300,000 for this program. This has increased to about 3 million per year over the MTEF, a fundamental shift, because we emphasized the important role of ensuring that there should be zero deaths. So that was the case that we made. And then I'm going to ask CFO just to cover the numbers to show what's the impact of the not having the Netball World Cup, 30 million, which the World Cup is happening this year, etc. CFO.
Thank you, HOD. So in the 22-23 financial year, so remember, normally they would give us specific allocations. So in the 22-23 financial year, we received additional funding once-off allocations to the amount of 67,847,000. So that included the 30 million, which wasn't reallocated in the current financial year. It included 15 million for after-school programs, which was not reallocated. And then 16.4 million for the scanners in archives, which were not reallocated. So all of those actually impacts on the net decrease of the current financial year. However, or the year under review. However, we did receive new funding to the value of 32.9 million. So if you take the 67.8 less the 42.9, that gives you the net decrease of the 42 million. So the additional ones, it's in the blue book, but maybe just to highlight a few, the 8.5 as an example, it's not a once-off allocation. It will be added to our baseline allocation going forward. Then we had the maintenance for the scanners within archives. They funded about 2.1 million to manage that process. That is carrying on, so it will form part of our baseline going forward. The after-school positive peer for youth, which we requested 15 million, a repeat of the 15 million. Unfortunately, they were able to give us only 5 million, but that will continue as part of our baseline going forward. So basically, our core funding wasn't touched. We received our core funding with the addition of the 32.9 million for specific purposes. Okay, and then they also provided us with inflationary increases for our existing allocations. So in real terms, our budget did not increase other than the specific allocations that we received and a few that will carry on as part of our baseline. Thank you.
Chair, just one more question. What are the EPWP opportunities that are being created? Carol is going to cover those.
Thank you, HUD. Good morning again, members. There was a question on what type of jobs will the EPWP take on. So the jobs that we're looking at is in libraries, in terms of book sorting, library operations, administration. It's in the museum sector as well, archive, digitization of archival material, the cultural tourism, facility management, administration, finance and supply chain management. So it's a variety of skills that the EPWPs will be trained in those sectors to enable them once they go out, they have the appropriate skills to find permanent jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to ask if there are any follow-up questions to that round. Member Windvogel, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, Chairperson. Chair, I would love to know in which towns these Willy Wagon libraries is in the rural areas. If we can get perhaps the names of these towns, of those rural communities. Then secondly, Chair, I also have a question on page 682. I just want to check, Chairperson, the APP
Member Van
page.
can we just do the follow-ups quickly and then we'll come back for another round?
Okay. Okay,
Member,
no, it's fine.
Do you have a follow-up?
Thanks, Chair.
Member Murray, do you have a follow-up question?
Chairman, thank you so much for seeing my hand. I want to come back to the EPWP, which I originally asked. The Minister gave a very broad answer, nothing specific about treating everybody the same, looking at everybody. I want facts, I want figures. Where are these EPW programs done? And I mean, can we have figures? How many people were trained? From which communities were they trained? Because some communities are worse off than others. Some communities are isolated. There's poverty hotspots where these people need it much more than in the city centers. We want facts. We don't want general statements from the minister. We need facts. Can the minister tell us this training, how many people were trained? Do we have figures? Who was trained to do what?
Thank you. Are there any other follow-up questions in that round? Nope. I'll hand over just to answer those.
Chairperson, I thought we were going to.
Member Kama, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, Chair, I do.
Please go ahead.
My follow-up, Chair, it's around the grant for the libraries. I think the HOD mentioned that some of the funding actually goes to the warm bodies, you know, the librarians and all of that. And now linking to the library that I had mentioned in, I think, is it in Ladies Meet, Chair, what we discovered in our visit is that the municipality misuses some of these funds, and I think the chief librarian in that library was even saying that in the libraries that are in the municipalities, she's the only qualified librarian, and others are assistants. And therefore the question follow up there would be, how are we ensuring as a department that the grants that we give to municipalities are used appropriately? If it's for warm bodies, how are we ensuring that the people who are employed are actually the people who are librarians and all of that? That's the first question that I have. Another follow-up, Chair, I didn't hear a response around the question that was asked by Member Von Vogel around the issue of the Khoi and Sen, or the issue of the House of Traditional Leaders. Whether is there a plan to have a House of Traditional Leaders in the Western Cape so that they are able to deal also with some of these cultural issues that are continuously raised, and by that I mean the genuine ones, not these ones that are used to further racial tensions in the Western Cape. And I'm glad that the department is actually saying that the funding for initiations is for all cultures, and let's ensure that all these cultures are protected. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll hand over to those follow-ups. I think maybe when the HOD answers around the Ladysmith Library, just some context. We visited the Ladysmith Library as part of our last oversight, and the committee was quite shocked when the librarian, well, she first gave us a disclaimer to say that she knows that after we leave, she's probably going to be suspended, but she's going to take the gap and be honest. And she said that DCAS was not involved in the recruitment of any staff, and she will just wake up and she'll come to the library and find that people have been appointed, and that the head of corporate services takes the key of the library, and he's got a list of community members that is not allowed to use the library. And she said, well, this is not how we operate. So like, and the context of that question was around, but even if it's the department's money, how is the department not involved in the spending of that money? And we know that specific municipality has been ungovernable for a while. So when you answer that, I'm sure some committee members would also like to go back to Kanaland at some point to see whether there's been any changes there as well.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for bringing that matter on the libraries to our attention. The funds are transferred to the municipalities. The municipalities have got their own processes of recruitment. And it should not be happening like what you've just said. The national body for librarianship has raised this concern. It's not unique to Ladysmith. It's a countrywide situation where municipalities just think that a librarian's role is not a professional role, that somebody gets displaced as the mayor's aide or anything, but not a librarian, and that person gets sent to the library to do work. And Liasa has raised that sharply, and at some stage we're working on a professionalization charter for the sector and ensuring that municipalities don't do these things. So that should not be happening at all. But Cecilia will talk to you about the program in place that we have where we try as much as possible to monitor the activities of municipalities and how our funds are being spent, because our funds can only be spent for the purpose that they are gazetted. And we are very clear what the guidelines are, and they should be following that. So I'll leave Cecilia to cover that one. And then the EPWP, our target for this year is 425. And they are spread throughout the province. And I'm just going to ask the Director of Museums to just talk, for example, because they have the larger geographical spread on this program. A larger number of EPWPs on this program are in the museums and with a significant geographical spread, just to give us some context. And then the other one was the... I'm showing people now. The plan about a Provincial House of Traditional Leaders. The process of recognition needs to first conclude. And on the basis of how many senior traditional or Khoisan, in fact, Khoisan leaders, because traditional leaders are not being considered in this work of this commission, how many are recognized will determine whether there will be a provincial house. For example, Gauteng has got 2 traditional leaders recognized within that province. And because they have not met the threshold, those 2 representatives sit in the National House of Traditional Leaders. So Gauteng does not have a Provincial House of Traditional Leadership. So I presume a similar thing will be followed here, that if we meet the threshold to have a provincial house, we will have a provincial house based on the outcomes on the commission on Khoisan matters. It has to be done in terms of the law, and there's every intention of ensuring that we have one if the National House deems we meet the threshold to have one. But we will be guided by the law as well as the National House of Traditional Leadership. The The willy wagons, I think we would rather provide a list of those because there's quite a number, unless Cecilia has got that. Yeah, I think, Chair, we would like to provide a list of all of those in all the rural areas. On a recent trip we took in November, I've forgotten some of the town names. Lyndon, can you just rattle off the town names? Yeah, all those areas have got, and they are not the only ones. I'm just talking about the West Coast. So throughout the province, in some of the smaller rural areas and some of the farms, because some of the farms have got libraries, we have those. So I'd rather we provide a comprehensive list. Can I just hand over to Michael to cover the EPWPs? Yeah.
Thank you, HOD. I have the figures for the EPWPs employed within the museum space for 2022-2023, and this will increase now for 2023-2024 because of the additional funding. So just out of interest, just within the museum space, this doesn't include the sports space, the cultural space, or the other spaces in which the department work. So just within the museum space, it's over 200 EPWP positions, and they are placed at affiliated museums across the province, in places like Beaufort West, which is 4, at Caledon 5, in Oudtshoorn 13, in Swellendam 19, in Prince Albert 4, Genadendal 7, Great Brock River 3, Hout Bay 9, Franschhoek 7, Portable 6, Lawandle there in Somerset West 4, Montague 6, Hermanus 12, Tulbach 8, Paul 3, the Sennegezicht Museum in the Cape Town 4, Fisheries Museum in Laiplek 2, at Shipwreck Museum in Bredasdorp 6, Stellenbosch 7, in Ceres 3, Wellington 2, Maritzburg 9, in the Southern Cape there at Mossel Bay 13, Greenpoint 5, George 5, Worcester 15, and then about 17 or so within the metro, makes up roughly just over the 200 within the museum space. Thank you.
And then, Chair, when you bring in sports, the whole total, so Michael just mentioned museums, there's libraries, there's archives, there's cultural tourism, and then there's sports, it comes to just close to 800. So they are spread throughout, and if required, we can provide that information as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. I'm now going to ask if there are any other questions in that round for pages 673 to 685. I just have a question with regards to Heritage Western Cape. We visited the Amalienstein Mission Church, and they are turning 150 this year. And some of the committee members asked at the time whether they're receiving any support from Heritage Western Cape, and the response was no. And I wanted to ask sort of what does the department do when people celebrate milestones like that, and also what is sort of the process of checking up on how those facilities are. The Amalienstein Church, sort of being 150 years old, is kept in fairly good condition, but you can see that there's very little done to encourage sort of tourism to it. There's no sort of program linked to the municipality itself. Sort of they've just forgotten about those people, and it's sort of just the Amalienstein community and the greater Zoar community that uses it. And they were saying that there's quite a lot of interest from international tourists, especially Dutch tourists, who come there specifically to visit that specific church. So I wanted to ask sort of what happens in those cases, for instance, and also in celebrating sort of other historic milestones. So we know Langa turns 100 this year as well. Sort of how are we sort of linking that into sort of cultural and heritage tourism in the province? And then I see Member Kama and then Member Windvogel. Mesuli?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Chair, I just want to check around the issue of safe and cohesive communities. I think the department says public spaces and a sense of community are key components. That is on page 682, are key components of building safe communities. Now, I want to check with regards to the department's safety intervention in the crime hotspots. As reported on page 34, it is clear that there is insufficient deployment of resources in these areas, especially for recreation centers, NGO funding, and supported sports clubs. Now, how does the department respond to the clear need for interventions in these hotspots, maybe through this budget or any other interventions? Because what we see, Chair, is that in our different communities, what used to be your safe spaces, they were left neglected, and I know the responsibility in most of them would be with the municipalities. But as a government that has a plan to intervene in these areas, what is it that we're doing? Because many of these facilities are left in a space that has now, in other instances, been taken over by criminal elements. So what interventions are we having in those areas? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Van Voorgel.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my question is on 682. I just want to check with the department. The APP page 38 details the Western Cape Youth Development Strategy. What I want to understand is, why is youth development strategy coordinated in a small office, and why are you not creating a youth directorate? And secondly, why is a pensioner hired as a head of youth and after schools program? Can't we get a youthful person to be responsible for this? Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, as we talk about inclusivity, over to the department.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to safe and cohesive communities, I'm just going to ask Ms. Bull to talk about our table on page 34. Just some context on that graph. So that graph, or table rather, it shows with the key programs that we lead with, what percentage of them are in the hotspots. So we've got mod centers throughout the province. 37% of those are in the hotspots. That's what we are trying to say. We are not saying we only have 37% presence in the hotspots and period. We are saying we have a significant presence throughout the province, but 37% of those, basically a third of all mod centers, are sitting in our hotspots. And this is a table that we are using to illustrate our activities in the hotspots. And we are very visible and present, and we are participating in all the various forums, ABTs, that have been set up to drive interventions in the hotspots. So I'm just going to ask Jackie to cover a little bit on those, as well as Lyndon to cover a little bit on that. And then the question on Heritage Western Cape, Michael will cover that one, and the processes for recognition or commemorating historical sites. For instance, Langa 100. We are meeting with the organizers of Langa 100, and we've been meeting with them since last year already. But the city also needs to be involved. The sites and recognition around the sites, a key player in all the sites is the property owner. The role that DCAS plays, or rather HWC plays, in ensuring that the property owner fulfills their responsibilities in terms of the law. And when they are not, there are ways using the law to ensure that they do. So we can issue repair orders and et cetera, et cetera. But unfortunately, we don't own the infrastructure. The infrastructure is owned by the property owner, whether it's the city or whether it's a private individuals or whether it's a church. But we just make sure that they make sure that all the properties that fall within the Act and need protection within the Act, the property owners are doing what their responsibilities are. So if Michael can just talk a little bit more on that. And then Jackie and Lyndon will close off with the safe and cohesive communities.
Okay, so just on the hotspots and the table on page 34, as was already mentioned, I think that the key thing there is that DCAS's work needs to touch every single community, but we recognize that with limited budgets, you've got to focus. And so what this is doing is it's showing where we have been able to focus and for across all the different programs in the hotspot areas. I think what's very important with this is, and I think this was mentioned in the beginning, is once you start a program in a community, you can't just move away from that community. You've got to remain working with communities that you start initiatives with. So all new money is being prioritized to expand our footprint in the hotspot areas. And that was our commitment to Treasury, was that new money would go to expanding footprint in these areas, but that this is what we've been able to, over the last year, shift the priority focus. And I think what's very interesting about this, if we look at this a year ago, you'll see that we have been able to make some shifts because of new initiatives and new partnerships to expand our footprint in the hotspot areas. But I think you covered the rest, HOD.
Thanks, Chair and members. So just going into the graph on page 34, we would notice that in the 18 hotspot areas, we have the mod centers in 17, and Hanover Park, we had one till about 2 to 3 years ago, and due to the violence here, we did not continue. We are hoping still to go back, and that will be subject to further discussion. We also have the neighboring schools that are also as part of the mod centers. There are 181 mod centers, and then we have neighboring schools that are also attached in the immediate surrounding to that. When we analyze the sport clubs, we will notice that the sport clubs are represented in most of the 18 hotspots. But the important note is that these are the clubs that are on the club development program. There are 200 clubs on the club development program, but in general, Chair, we fund 145 sport and recreation federations. So that means by extension, many of the clubs are also affiliated to those federations that we fund. We've indicated the clubs that are on club development that is in our program as well. Then in terms of the recreation centers, we also have recreation centers in most of the areas that we've numbered there, and these are, we normally go an extra 5 recreation areas each year as our budget allows as well. Then we have representation on the 18 ABT areas that is headed by the Department of Health. This next Friday, we will be having representation in the workshop. We will be planning to work together with Community Safety, Department of Health, and other departments to ensure that we have activities and programs. In October, Chair and members, we had a netball activation in Delft. And we also work very closely with the City of Cape Town to ensure that we don't duplicate what the City of Cape Town is doing, and that we make sure that we can have joint programs with them in these hotspot areas. So we believe that through the joint ABT approach that's headed by DOH, that we as a department will be able to contribute the resources of DCAS in these particular areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD. I'll respond with regards to the question to HWC. So Heritage Western Cape, we're essentially a permitting authority when it comes to the various properties and sites in the Western Cape. HOD is absolutely correct that the responsibility is on the property owner to do the necessary maintenance and conservation. Where HWC comes in is we provide the necessary permitting. We also provide throughout the province a system of monitoring through conservation, with working together with conservation bodies and municipalities and the SAPS. And then we also do the promotion of heritage through site visits and the declaration of provincial heritage sites. Specifically, I think this question also maybe touches within the museum space, where museums can partner with various community organizations to help promote their sites and buildings, etc. One of the projects within the museum space in 2023-2024, through the EPWP program, we are employing heritage ambassadors within areas like Langa, Nyanga, and Guguletu, where they will be researching, writing up, and promoting areas where there's community facilities that's underutilized. And that's just one example. Thank you.
And then, Chair, I just forgot to just cover the fact that the majority of the staff in the youth program in DCAS is staffed by youth. In fact, from our coaches in the mod centers, it's all the youth interventions within DCAS are heavily staffed by youth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's yeah, more and more that's going to come up in the next few months because there's a lot of memes that I've seen on the internet about our minister, national minister, and sort of age issues around there. So we should be prepared for that. Colleagues, I'm going to ask that we take a 15-minute break. There is some coffee and refreshments in the members' lounge, but you're also welcome to just take a quick comfort break and stretch your legs. So we'll be back in 15 minutes. Welcome back, members and colleagues. I hope you enjoyed the little stretch, and I hope that the members at home enjoyed their scones and muffins, as well as the coffee that they made themselves. Colleagues, we're now going to go over to pages 686 to 694.
Chairperson?
Yes, Member Van Voorhol?
Yeah, Chair, I'm not sure, did I miss the part where you asked us for follow-ups, because my question was not really answered.
Which question was that, ma'am?
That was on the youth strategy.
Okay.
I just
repeat the question.
Yeah. Chairperson, I was not really asked, answered. My question to the department was, are they not forming a youth directorate instead of having a small youth office? And also, why the head of youth is a pensioner? In response, they only say the youth programs are dominated by youth. So they must really answer my question. I need an answer on my questions, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, so the answer, the question then was why an office and not a directorate. So we'll bear that in mind when we take the round, so the department can just hold on to that one. Can I get an indication if there are any hands for 686 to 694? Member Kama, then Member Pretorius.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My question would be on page 688, around Program 3, Library and Archive Services. I think it talks about that the department has continued to support municipalities in rendering the service. And I want to focus on internet connectivity, Chair, because on page 78 of the APPs, it shows that we have a total of 374 libraries in the province, but only 232 are connected to the public internet access. I therefore want to check, does that mean that we have 142 if we take, or 142 if we take the difference from that of libraries that are not connected to the internet? If that's the case, which areas and municipalities are these libraries, and how will the department ensure that all libraries are connected to the internet? And in that, perhaps when we get the list of the libraries that are in containers or the wheelie bins, can we also in that list get a list in terms of libraries that do not have internet and when that will restore? 689, Chair, on the issue of sports. On page 56 of the APP, we noted that there is a vacancy for the director for sports development, and we want to check how long has this been vacant and the reasons thereof that resulted in the vacancy and progress made to fill the vacancy. And secondly, with regards to sports funding, how much is allocated for soccer and the support that is given to SAFA, and perhaps, Chair, get a sense of what is this funding for. I'm just mentioning SAFA because they're one of the associations or federations with the most membership. I think the participation is greater in football. But would want to get a sense of how much is given to rugby, netball, cricket, athletics, and the likes, because the driver, Chair, of the delivery of sports are the federations. And we want to check why is the department not rearranging the its funding model for greater impact to ensure that there's proper funding for federations to deliver and develop sports in the province, and be actually be involved and be one of the key drivers in the school sports, your mod programs, and all things sports, because sports federations they are the platform that gives the most opportunities for young people to be absorbed, even scouted to play in other clubs, or even selections to the national sporting codes. And lastly, on that, we want to check how much is given to softball, especially the Western Cape Softball Association, and how much has been given to, even if it's the fund last financial year, to the Lavender Hill Sports Softball Club, and what other support is given to this particular soft club. And in this chair, if we can get maybe in writing, if the department does not have the detail now, the funding that would have been given to the Lavender Hill Softball Club from the 2019 to date, and what other support is the department giving to that specific club. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to make some observations and ask questions about museums and heritage on page 687. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Minister for the appointment of the new governing bodies for the affiliated museums. It was much needed in the place that I come from, George, and I want to thank her for that. On the point of museums, Chair, I happen to know in a previous life I was, for all my sins, I was a member of the George Museum Management Committee. I know that there are extensive renovations taking place in George, and I'm grateful for that. That building in itself is a heritage building. When I was a kid there, I remember it as being a very popular watering hole, and it's something totally different now, and I think it certainly adds to the let's say the aura of George. In posing this question, it's not only about George Museum. I know that a lot of money is being spent on museums. I was just wondering, Chair, what is the return on investment? What is it measured at all? In other words, how many people visit museums, and the monies that we are laying out on museums, I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, is a hell of a lot. It runs into many, many, many millions. And why are we actually doing it? Couldn't that monies be repurposed elsewhere? Is there still a need for a museum? I know it's a very controversial question. Then as far as heritage is concerned, you know, I'm the very new constituency head for Swellendam, and I'm very grateful for that. The difference between the preservation of historic buildings in Swellendam and George it's a massive divide. There is no comparison. And I know it's not your department, HOD, that is responsible for that. But in terms of aesthetics committees and so forth, which I suppose is also not your responsibility, I just wonder where the matter has fallen between the chairs. And in particular, I want to refer to George, and I think it's something that Mr. Jansen van Rensburg is familiar with, IRF 658, the old magistrates building in George. That building belongs to National Public Works. It stands on a piece of land that's, I think, almost 7 hectares in size. That stand is divided from the Provincial Hospital by a wetland. the police, who was the tenant in that building, has allowed it to become what it is now, and that is a shell. I think all that is required, and I'm sorry for saying this, is somebody to put a match under it and it'll be gone forever. I know that your department, HOD, has had liaisons with National, etc. But I haven't seen, with all respect, I haven't seen or heard of any results. And in that particular case, I would like to know what are the future plans? Are there plans for that building within the context of province? I think it should be music to the ears of the Department of Health, which I also happen to chair in the committee in this legislature. That land is lying fallow. It's very, very well located. So what are the future plans? Are the land to be transferred? At the moment, it's a drug house. And I don't think that's what we want for it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just want to check the hands of the members online. Are those old hands? Okay, we can assume that it's old hands. I'll now then hand over to the department for that round.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Director Libraries will cover the internet and connectivity question. I will cover the vacancy question. Dr. Bow will cover the funding related questions. And then CEO Heritage Western Cape and Director of Museums Heritage will cover the last two questions. I will go first with the vacancy. The vacancy came about as a result of a retirement. This happened in October, end of October 2022. We've now completed interviews for the filling that vacancy, and the process is now going to sort of go through the cabinet processes where the final approval happens for SMS related positions. They have to go through that process. But on the interviewing side, competency assessments, all of that has been concluded. They are just probably dealing with matters like vetting, etc. So that we quite comfortable has already been concluded. I'd now like to hand over to Cecilia to the connectivity one, and then I will come back and cover the youth one right at the end, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD. So with regards to internet access, yes, the Rural Library Connectivity Project with the City of Cape Town Smart Cape connects 333 of our libraries. So we have 42 libraries without internet access currently. 12 of these are libraries in correctional services. So in correctional services, we are not allowed to provide an internet service. So those are discounted. And then the rest has got various different regions, which we've responded to in a parliamentary question we actually just got last week. So those reasons will be written there. But it's a range of regions from no infrastructure actually or network connectivity in that area. So even if we have an LTE device, if fiber is not there, we actually can't get the network to them because the infrastructure is not good enough. There's also some security issues in some of our smaller container libraries. But we do have a program, and this year we will be, in the next 2 years, we hope that we can connect 4 more with the broadband program as well of Western Cape Government. So yeah, so we're working on connecting all those that can be connected. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will deal with the funding questions. So in terms of our funding policy, all federations have the opportunity to apply each year for funding. The funding application forms generally become available from June and remains open until 30 September. In the period June, July, August, September, the team does virtual and physical visits to districts where the funding forms are workshopped, because there's a lot of information that we need in order to assess that. Once we have done the workshop, we have an online application funding process that federations are then requested to put all the information online so that it makes the process a bit easier. We have 145 sport federations that we fund on an annual basis. The funding that is made available is close to 12 million rand, and what we then follow is from October onwards, Chair, we then have a process of what we call consolidation, where we check AGM minutes, audited financial statements, have you complied with all outstanding reports, etc. Once all that has been concluded, Mr. Tutu and his team then has a meeting with the 6 district sport council chairpersons. At that particular meeting, it's an adjudication process, and they then have the opportunity to discuss each of the applications. It's normally a whole day Saturday meeting where people travel into our offices and have this, what we call the adjudication meeting that finalizes a recommendation to the head of department. They take into consideration good governance in a particular federation. Has the federation also complied with its internal workings of attending to district sport council meetings? Have they made sure that they have correct transformative targets that have been met in terms of women and girls, in terms of disability, access and opportunity? So once we have all of those things in place and we have received the allocation letter for the next particular year, we are then able to make a recommendation to the HOD, and the HOD then would apply his mind to the matter at hand. So each federation is entitled to apply if they are a member of a sport council. So in our case, South Africa has got 16 priority codes, of which football is one. You have cricket, rugby, netball, athletics, all the codes. And then you also have, besides the 16 priority codes, you also have Olympic codes. So you'll find, for instance, a code like rowing is an Olympic code. Code like canoeing is Olympic and will now make its debut in 2024. The interesting one that's making its debut is, in fact, skateboarding. So for South Africa to compete, we now would have to make some of our funds available to skateboarders for their events and their activities in order to go through. So it's not just a matter of only using size and membership in order to allocate funding. There's also Olympic and priority reasons why we would make funding available to certain codes. Be that as it may, SAFA is represented on all our sport councils, and they are also a recipient of transfer funding. And then they are also, out of the 200 clubs on our club development program, out of the 200 clubs, SAFA has 50 clubs on there. So SAFA, throughout all the districts, have got club development access where we give support to transport, equipment and attire, and they stay on the program, each of those clubs that are nominated for 3 years. So SAFA has got a very big presence in different programs, and we also work with them to do training and other activities as well. We will be, Chair, Mr. Karma invited us to also send in writing some of his other questions that we will do about Lavender Hill Softball Club. We will respond in writing. We don't have the information from 2019 to date, so I would have to go and find out if they indeed received funding, and if any, what was the amount. We will certainly send that. And then in terms of our mod programs, as I said before, we have 181 mod centers, and in this particular year, we will have 365 neighboring schools as well. So all our funding is given on an application-based process. So if somebody has not applied, we would not have given funding in a particular year. And sometimes there are world championships that happen every second year that people would apply for. So it's not on an every year basis that federations would receive funding for those aspects. The majority of the federations use the funding for administration, for transport, for development, capacity building and transformation. That is by and large what they use their funding for, and they can apply for both that and hosting of events, both at Western Cape and at South African and at international level. Chair, that's our input with regard to the sport federations. Thank you.
Chair, that was the follow-up on the youth question. In trying to answer that question, I'll just need to map out how we are dealing with youth in the Western Cape government as a whole, and then zero in on DCAS and efforts that DCAS has made to elevate the youth focus. So within the Western Cape government, we have the Western Cape Government Youth Forum, whose responsibility it is to deliver on the youth strategy, the Western Cape Government Youth Strategy, the strategy which is about to be reviewed. It's the same youth forum that has recently developed the norms and standards for youth programs within the Western Cape government. And it is made up of all departments in the Western Cape, all senior colleagues, SMS colleagues, other colleagues lower than SMS participating in this forum and making sure that there is coordination throughout the whole of the Western Cape government on youth-related interventions. So that is at a government level. Within DCAS, the entire DCAS is youth-focused. The bulk of our work is dealing with from early childhood all the way up. So over and above the fact that we acknowledge that the bulk of what we do has a very specific youth leaning, we have set up a separate office to deal with youth and after-school programs, to emphasize the significance of youth and coordinate efforts within DCAS, and using the same office to coordinate the youth focus for the whole of Western Cape government. DCAS has been given the responsibility to coordinate all youth activities within the Western Cape government. We acknowledge that the component is not adequately staffed, and we are waiting for this process of the development of the new structures of the new departments, because we've been requesting for an OD exercise for DCAS to make sure that DCAS is aligned to its more revised mandate, which has youth at its center. So that is something that we're already working on and agree that we need to boost capacity. And we've already written to organizational development to say that one of the areas that we need to be bolstered is our youth, to make sure that it is integrally embedded within the structures, the official structures of DCAS. We have a structure for the youth program, and like I said, we acknowledge it's not fully capacitated, but acknowledge that it is also done together with work that is sitting in the directorate. So our school sports program and all of those, the mod program, are formally addressed within the structure of DCAS under sports development. And the bulk of our interventions that are youth focused are sitting there. Same with on the arts side, in the arts and culture space, the bulk of the work that we are doing there has a very specific youth focus, but we are trying to make sure that all of that is coordinated rather than happening in different spaces, hence the exercise that will be coming up of the organizational review of DCAS. The youth office is staffed by a very competent individual, very experienced individual, competent in the space of youth development, and has made great strides bringing in partners into the space. There's a lot of funding that we are receiving from partners in the NGO space, funding that we are getting from the presidency as a result of interventions and efforts and networks and the work of this individual. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we are now going to go over to pages 695 to...
Yes, sorry for interrupting. My questions still have to be responded to.
Oh, sorry, yes, the question about the George, the land parcel, Mr. Finn.
I'll take the need for museums. Michael will take George and the other building. So your question is very similar to but it's almost, slightly different. The bulk of what DCAS is about, as mentioned in our vision, about inclusivity, about cohesion. And the case we make for DCAS is that you cannot have economic growth and all of those great things with a fragmented society. It's not going to happen. We have to be pulling together in one direction. Museums are spaces where we pause and reflect on our past. And in our case, it is a very difficult past and one that must not be very quickly forgotten. In fact, should never be forgotten. And then process our way forward. And museums are places of reflection for that. And to contextualize the past as well, and create opportunities for us to find ourselves and go together as a nation. So museums will always be relevant. What may differ from time to time is the form they take. So they may be more virtual museums going forward. There may be a more stronger emphasis on programs outside of the physical infrastructure. But the museums and the buildings that house them have fundamental stories that need to be told. And I believe there will forever be a need for those, especially given that if the people of the Western Cape are not cohesive, the Western Cape will not succeed. The community safety will tell you that in their statistics for murders, a significant number of the murders are not caused through gang violence. A significant number are caused through disagreements between people. So community cohesion is a risk. The World Economic Forum has raised it as a risk 2 years ago, as a risk that may materialize globally. So community cohesion is a very important thing that we need to manage, and museums are not the silver bullet, but a very important partner in getting communities to be cohesive, getting communities to be inclusive in the stories that we tell in the museum, so that some people who have not normally seen their stories being told now begin to find themselves and form, sort of get a sense of belonging. So I think that's my attempt to respond to that question about the significance of museums going forward. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to hand over to Michael to answer the other two related.
Thank you so much, HOD. I think maybe just on the George Museum and the expenditure there, just to add to what HOD have said, is that the George Museum is a provincial museum, and the primary reason for the most recent renovations has been to ensure that that building complies to occupational health and safety standards, which it previously didn't, and it therefore required quite a massive overhaul of the majority of the museum. And then the opportunity was seized to also take some of the spaces and make them better for the exhibitions. But the majority of the money and the reason for it is to bring it up to occupational health and safety standards. With regards to the Old Magistrate building, buildings, the owner of the building or the property is responsible for the maintenance. This is a nationally owned site, and we've had some challenges with nationally owned sites in our communications with other spheres of government for them to do the maintenance. The legislation does empower HWC to issue a compulsory repair order. However, once we've done that, the legislation then puts the responsibility on HWC to step in and repair the property and potentially claim back the money from the property owner. The challenge with that is that there are several sites across the Western Province, not just government-owned sites, but even private owner sites, where we're working with them. If we stepped in for one, it would set a precedent and we had to do it for all, and that would totally bankrupt us. So what we are busy doing in trying to mitigate this challenge is to create a list of these properties, and that will be followed by a costing. That would then be followed by approaching Treasury to see if there is a way that we could fund and then legally hold the owners responsible for reimbursing the expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. Pages 695 to 670, to 733. Member Kama, will you start us off?
No, thanks, Chair. I don't have questions on the said pages, but I hope that I want to appeal to your kindness to just do some follow-ups on the responses that were given.
I have no kindness, but you may go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I think the follow-up that I want to have, and I agree with the sentiment of the HOD around cohesive communities. I want to check, Chair, because in the response around the funding, I could sense that the sports councils also play a pivotal role. I therefore want to check what role does the department play to ensure that these sports councils are not captured by certain sporting codes or other interests that all federations do have not only a fair opportunity of accessing the resources, but also that the department is able itself to direct funding to the areas that it deems as areas of concern. And what I'm not getting, Chair, is the figure as to, for example, let's say last year, in the financial year that is ending, how much was, for example, SAFA given in the province, and linked to that issue I was raising around the sports councils. I understand that in or around 2018, there was an extension that was granted to the Western Cape Sports Arbitration Forum. So I want to check if is there a new arbitration forum that would have been established now. But on the federations, can we get, for example, can we get which federation was mostly funded last year and which was the least? Because through these chair questions, we'll then be able to have a sense of whether government is playing its role of ensuring that we get young people involved even in the area of sports development. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Barnes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Chair, my first question is on page 697 under table 8.1, summary of payments and estimates. What is the justification for the budget cuts when this department is already underfunded? With regards to the cuts to conditional grants, why is the department not asking the Premier and Treasury to allocate more funds for this from the source of 1 billion where the energy crisis, for instance, is being funded from? Chair, this is one department that always suffers when it comes to cutting of budget, but yet I have the view that says it's one department that can actually address all our problems in the province. For example, if sports is taken serious, we'll have less sick people going to health department and hospitals. We'll have less criminals going to jail. So if we don't pay that necessary attention to this department, honestly, we will always have serious challenges. And I feel that really we don't give enough of our budget into to this department. My second question, Chair, will be on page 701 under table 9.1, summary of payments and estimates under program 1 administration. What are the reasons for this decrease to the budget for these sub-programs? My third question, Chair, will be on page 707 under table 9.3, summary of payments and estimates program 3, library and archive services. What are the reasons for the decreased budget for this sub-program? And then my last one, Chair, is on page 711, table 9.4, summary of payments. What are the reasons, Chair, for the decreased budgets for the sub-program? While we welcome the increase for sport and school sports, the budgets for the sub-programs remains too small. Are there plans to get additional budget? Can we get the MEC to lead the charge for this increased budget? Please, Chair. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Barnes, and welcome. Members, any other members for pages 695 to 733? No, I'll then hand over to the HOD and the department.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with, I'll start with Member Barnes and then Dr. Bow will cover Member Kama at the end after the CFO. I want us to deal with the decreases and explaining those. So first, I agree with Member Barnes and would like to assure the member that we have done everything in our power to bring very clearly the importance of DCAS in ensuring that the challenges we see, whether it's in the crime space or within the health space, are as a result of underinvestment much earlier in a space where DCAS plays and to some extent WCED. When our members of the public are now clients of Department of Health and Department of Social Development, it's already too late. So it requires a fundamental shift in approach to the budget within the context of long-term thinking. So when you invest in community safety, for instance, I'm just going to use that as an example, you can make targeted interventions based on data, and when trends shift, you can very easily shift those resources elsewhere. But in most cases, you're only dealing with symptoms. You will see your results fairly much soon, but you'll be dealing with symptoms. But with DCAS, the investments we are making today on the 5-year-old, on the 10-year-old, on the 15-year-old, the results will be seen in another 5, 10, 15 years. But the intervention needs to happen now. So that is a shift that is required to acknowledge that whilst we need to deal with the fires that are currently burning and are concerning us right now, we need to make sure that we quell the fires of the future, because these fires are only going to increase. That's the only trajectory that is expected. It's going to increase unless you deal with the causes. Most of the causes are at a much earlier space upstream, and that is where DCAS plays. So that is where the shift is required. It's a difficult shift to make because it means you must take money from frontline services that are experiencing pressure right now, but with the understanding that it will quell the pressure 5, 10, 15 years later. And that is a shift that has not been made completely yet, because DCAS is one of those departments, not the only department, but it's one of those departments that, if well resourced, can reduce the pressure into the future. I'd like to ask CFO to just, with all the shifts that have been made, fundamental shifts that have been made and the questions that have been asked, to just explain those, and then Dr. Bower to come back and cover Member Kama's questions. CFO.
Thank you, HOD. So the first question was on page 701, reasons for decreases. And I think I've already attempted to respond to this. So I'm just going to summarize once again. So the main reason for the decrease for the vote overall is because of the net effect of funding received in the previous year that was not reallocated in the current year, even though we received additional funding to the tune of about 42.7 million. So it's a 67 in the previous year minus the 42, and the net effect then comes to the 42. Or the 32, and then the net effect is the 42 million. So that is really the reason for the 4.58% decrease overall on the vote. Then I'm going to just go into the program. So program 1, there was a question as to why the program specifically decreased. So the net decrease is 0.37 for the program as a whole. And that is mainly because of, in the office of the MEC, we provided additional funding for legal fees. And legal fees is something that you cannot forecast accurately. It's demand driven. So we adjust the budget as and when it is required.
The legal fees related to the...
So it's for the Heritage Tribunal. That is what the legal fees were required for. Then on management services, we had 2 long service awards in the current financial year, and we had moved or shifted funding from other programs to cover the cost of those long service awards because we were not able to give those awards to our staff because of COVID. Then the next question was on table 9.2. Again, the reason for some of the decreases. In fact, for this one overall, I'm not sure, I think this one wasn't touched. My apologies. I think it was on page 711, I think was the last question.
9.4.
So page 711, again, the biggest drop from 2022 to 23, it's because of the 30 million for the World Cup, the Netball World Cup that was included in the 22-23 financial year, but not in the 23-24, because there is no need for the 30 million because we are hosting in the 23-24 financial year.
Then 9.3, archives.
And then archives.
Program 3.
Yeah, in program 3, the drop in archives is because of the digitization scanners that we procured in the 22-23 financial year, for which we received about 16.4 million, which is not repeated in the current financial year. I think that covers all the budget questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I will respond to Member Karma's question relating to the sport councils. Chair, the sport council's role has been set out in the National Sport and Recreation Plan, which came into effect in 2011. Sport councils in South Africa have quite a long history, and in fact, sport councils were first formed in March 73. So this year is the 50th anniversary. Now, in the Western Cape, the sport councils, in fact, work in the following manner. In each of the districts, the sport federations that are members of that district, they vote for the executive democratically, and they do annual and biannual elections as per the constitutions. So from our side as the department, we normally attend those meetings. We also have one of our staff members per district that sits in an ex officio capacity on those committees, no voting power. He or she just sits on the committee to observe and give input from the department side. But from our side, we respect the process that civil society has set out. They make their own rules. We ensure that the rules are followed. We normally are the returning officers in those elections, but it could be that whatever code or whatever person is chosen, he or she is chosen by their peers in that particular district sport councils. So we work very closely with the sport councils in the districts, and we in fact try to ensure that opportunities are given throughout the Western Cape. There are the 6 district sport councils, and then you have the Western Cape Provincial Sport Confederation, which is made up of all 6, and then you also have commissions relating to Athletes Commission, Women and Girls, Coaches Commission, etc. So they've got their own structure, and they are members of SASCOC, the South African Sport and Olympic Confederation. So they've got their own reporting line. They don't report to us. We are partners in the delivery of sport in South Africa as per the National Sport and Recreation Plan, as well as the National Sport and Recreation Act as well. So that is our partnership that we have. So if there are issues that we need to address, we will address them. And I have a meeting with my team on a monthly basis with the Confederation's CEO and their general manager, their treasurer, etc. And we look at various matters of common concern, and we normally meet with them once a year, in which we plan strategically with them. Our next meeting is planned for May, where we, as the elections have now concluded and our financial year would have started, and then we would then plan some of the activities together that we may have either on Youth Day, Human Rights Day, Women's Day, Heritage Day, etc., and Disability Day. So some of those activities we will do together with themselves. Chair, we're not able this morning to give an exact figure for what we support SAFA, because that is something that would also be audited, because we would be funding SAFA in a number of manner and forms. So, for instance, we would have paid for transport for some of the teams that played in the Bale playoffs. And those invoices would still be coming through, and we in fact cover all 6 SAFA districts in the Western Cape, and we would be running capacity building courses with them, as well as any transfers that we would have done to them. So we will send such a report in the next 2 weeks when our financial year has concluded and all our invoices have been settled, so that we could have a clear figure in that regard. In terms of the arbitration forum, it is correct that the last arbitration forum came to an end in 2018, and then in 2019 we sent out an advertisement, a call for members to actually who wish to be part of this. We only had 3 applications to that. We elected at that stage not to continue with the arbitration forum, because National also indicated that they are starting an arbitration forum in terms of their policy that all disputes would be able to go to. So, Chair, we in the department will be discussing with the HOD and the Minister what we should do going forward in the new financial year, because there is a view that government should not get involved in civil society disputes in terms of the International Olympic Committee intervention, that the government should stay out of sport. So it's a debate that we are having. It's also not legislation that we must have an arbitration forum. So it is a discussion that we would have internally as a department, whether we're going to take an arbitration forum forward or not. But in the last few years, there hasn't been that extensive number of disputes that would require us to have a big arbitration forum. But be that as it may, it will be a discussion between ourselves, Minister, and the department. We are involved with all federations, and as I said, everybody that applies, we give them due deference within the application process. And CFO has dealt with the budget aspects that Member Barnes requested. Thank you, Chair.
We will also send information on which federation received most funds and which federation received the least funds. And then Member Barnes also asked, are there plans to get more funds? And the answer to that is yes. The model that we are using now involves a lot of collaboration with partners with similar intentions as us, who also bring their own funding. We're doing a lot of that in the youth space. We're doing a lot of that in the art space. And we've also been applying to the presidential stimulus program, and we've secured significant funding for the youth program there. In fact, in the current financial year, we were able to secure funding to even begin the Yebonia program in the Eastern Cape, to be run by the Eastern Cape Department of DCAS, a similar department like DCAS, but through interventions of the Western Cape in applying to the presidential stimulus and receiving these funds. And we've now just received word that we will be receiving more funding from a different program, but also within the presidential stimulus package. We also, Minister has raised the matter within the MINMEC space to make funding available to provinces that are performing well on the conditional grant. It's a discussion that has gone on for a number of years, but last year a decision was taken at MINMEC that underperforming provinces would then cede their funding to provinces that are performing well, so that the grant in itself, in its totality, nationally, is not at risk, because National Treasury looks at the performance of the grant as a whole, as opposed to the performance of the different provinces. And if the grant does not perform because some provinces are not performing, the entire grant gets cut. And then that cut is then transferred to all the departments, all the provinces by the national department. So we've made this case through the minister, and there's now agreement that as early as possible, where the monitoring team of the national department sees that a particular province is struggling, the necessary statutory processes must take place to ensure that the funds are redirected to other provinces. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got a member, Pretorius, has a question. And then I also just want to check with the members of the public joining us. Do you have any questions? No questions from you guys? Sorry? Okay. So after Member Pretorius, we'll give the members of the public an opportunity to make some input. If there are any members of the public online, please let me know as well. Member Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, as far as the table A4 and A5 payments are concerned and transfers to the municipalities and to district municipalities, is there a regulatory framework, Chair, in terms of which these monies, once it's been transferred, that the department can actually have an oversight how these monies are distributed and used within those areas? And if not, well, no. And is there within such a framework, if I may call it a framework, is there the opportunity to withdraw those monies if it hadn't been appropriated appropriately? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is correct. I'm just going to ask Cecilia to explain the process that is followed in libraries, the monitoring visits and all of those things, and then Lyndon to do the same. There have been instances when we've had to get monies returned to the Western Cape government. So ask Cecilia to go first and then Lyndon to follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HOD. Yes, so all funding that we transfer to municipalities is done through a MOA. It's very detailed with a business plan of exactly what it must be used for. We get monthly expenditure reports that indicates exactly against that business plan, what it has been spent for, also against the staff list and the COE budget. And then we have monitoring visits with each municipality. So quarterly we go to all the municipalities, we meet with the municipal library managers, the CFOs, and whoever wants to join on that specific occasion. I think that covers, yes, that's how we monitor within library service. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Remember, we've got a similar process. We start on the 1st of July in the new financial year of the municipalities, where we send the application forms to the municipalities. They then have between 1 July and 30 September to send their applications for the following financial year. Once we then receive that, we then look at that, prepare a submission for the accounting officer. He would then either approve, call us in, ask questions, and we are then able to look at the applications and so forth. Once we have done that, Finance then sends a note through to Treasury, and Treasury then places what has been signed off in the submission in the Government Gazette. It is then formally gazetted, and municipalities are then informed of their allocation. Once the formal gazetting process then takes place, the following financial year, normally in the first month of July, the MOAs are signed. In terms of what we in sport do is that we do quarterly reports and visits. So each quarter, that specific municipality that receives the funding must then send that through. We then also visit to make sure that both our district offices and our facilities unit, they then go monitor the construction or upgrading of the courts. And at the end of the process, we normally have Minister Marais opening the particular facility. So this is done in particular with the funding that we as the department makes available. And then we also have MIG funding. The Municipal Infrastructure Grant funding gets discussed every month on the 20th of each month around there in Worcester. All municipalities get together either virtually or physically at that venue, and we send representatives to that department. Local government chairs the meeting, and each municipality must give an input on their progress. We as a department can give input into the norms and standards of sport facilities. We also have to ensure that an endorsement letter is given once the public participation process has concluded. If there is no endorsement letter, then MIG and COCTA do not make the funds available. So all sector departments play a very important role. And then, of course, if they have not spent 40% of the grant by December, which is their mid-year, then COCTA and MIG withholds the funding as well. So both local government and ourselves play a monitoring role when it comes to MIG, COCTA, and own funding as well. Thank you.
Chair, just to say this clarity is in relation to the conditional grant for public libraries, as well as the sports infrastructure and the grant that we receive from national. And also to say that the Division of Revenue Act also allows for retention or requesting unused funds to be returned from municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the gentleman at the back, you said you didn't have a specific question, but you'd like to make some comments.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank to everyone. As I introduce, I'm the chairperson of Sport Council, Gugulethu Sport Council. Firstly, we want to thank for this opportunity that we are invited. We received a late invitation yesterday, last night. We tell ourselves we can't miss this opportunity. We grab in both hands. We tell ourselves we'll be here because we believe as a leader, you can't fight without information. We are here to inform ourselves with the information. I've been living in Gugulethu for more than 49 years. I was born in Gugulethu, and I know all the corners of Gugulethu. I've been involved in development in Gugulethu. We've been organizing a march, calling the city mayor to come and see the facilities in Gugulethu. I spoke even to Honorable MEC Marias. I took pictures in Gugulethu. The facilities are dead, are bad. Thanks to member Kama to raise these issues of the facilities. When we spoke to MEC, she introduced me to the MEC from sport because she's the one who's in charge with the facilities in Gugulethu in city of Cape Town. But the reality is, she told me that without these facilities being good state in good condition, you guys at TICAS cannot achieve your programs. These facilities to be in good standard. We know it's not your department, it's city department, but the point was raised by Mr. Kama. You guys must do a follow-up and check these facilities to achieve your program. These facilities are dead. We took pictures, we invite them. We invite the MMC, we have a march, we invite them to come and see our swimming pool been closed since 5 years before the COVID. We saw pictures, other facilities, swimming pylons, which one? Newlands, Blue Down, all the facilities are in good standing because we believe in God. We are equal under God's eyes. We are equal under government eyes. So we want in this Gugulethu people to be treated equally. We want our facilities to be in good standing, to good condition, so that we can achieve. Because if you can go and check the stats, Gugulethu is one of the area that is rated in murders. There's a crime, it's big. Nyanga is next to Gugulethu. The crime is bad there. So we want to make sure that the facilities are good standing. And also you mentioned the money that, as Honorable was raising the issue of the museum, the money is more that side of the museum, more than the sport facility, even the school sports. We grow up with there's always the day of the school day. Let's say Wednesday, it's a school sport. I listened to the budget of the Premier of Gauteng. They said they want to make sure that there is a school day, the sport day. So if there's no sport day, our schools in Gugulethu, now they're renovating, they're extending the classes instead of the facilities. We want you guys to go to Gugulethu schools and see there is no even one school that they could still have a facility for the kids to play. The kids even, I come from the background of arts and culture, of choral and opera. There is no choral, even nowadays. These things of EPW, they must go to these schools, not only on one side of your museum, must go and assist. We know the city, they've got their EPWs, but also we need those EPW to assist our kids. That's what we want to build as a sport council, that relationship with schools, to make sure that those kids after school, they go to attend our clubs. We've got 16 codes in our facilities. We hear that there's federation. We know that. We know the Cape Town Sport Council. We are trying to register to affiliate that on that. But I want to appeal to you guys to make sure that we monitor this money that are doing the right thing. We saw in the news, Terry Peto get 10 million. That 10 million, not even a cent, that's go to the sport. It was supposed to be youth, but that not even a cent. There are a lot of organizations that are applying to you guys, but they've got good in writing, they got good in document, but if you do your follow-up, if you're not doing that, we will do that. We will apply to the NPA, we apply to the public protector to investigate that those people that are applying to you guys, getting money, you doing on the good job, you take the money, you're giving to the people, but those money are doing the right, they are doing, because we know our 16 codes, if you say you give the money to SAFA, SAFA is not doing the development, transporting who? If you talk about LFA, LFA club, we know we've got a meeting tomorrow. We've got a program that we're running Easter weekend every year. We've got a program tomorrow with Guguletu LFA. We know that there is no money that's transporting because they are playing in Guguletu. There is no, the kids need balls. Kids need kids, but when you talk about the transport where? LFA is playing in Guguletu. So SAFA, if he's doing that, playing, that means not talking about development. Yeah, we want to hear the development. We don't want to hear Vodacom and other leagues. We want to hear, because we're representing Guguletu. Guguletu want to hear that there is money that's going to those clubs, that's 16 club, even if at least once or twice club. And then you can come to us as a structure at Guguletu that knows those clubs, that we can say, okay, because we not want anything for the executive. We want to make sure that those, the only federations, you can say cricket, we know cricket, that is fine, the federation is assisting our club there. They are paying for the coach and for the transporting them. But other codes, I don't have federation. So that money is not going, it's not assisting other that were mentioned, that not all of the 16 are under federation. So that thing that we want to make sure working together, they will take us to check, to investigate. That money that you're sending to those federations are going to Guguletu. We know there are people in Guguletu that are applying. They are good in paperwork. They say, okay, there's a funding that is for TICAS. They apply. But that money, those guys, they're doing in agriculture, they're doing other things. They're not doing sport. But that money is not relevant for those people. So we want those money. It's said that the money is decreased to 425,000 to 2 million. I mean, the challenges are going up, but the money is decreasing. I mean, we don't understand. The population are not just like Guguletu. We're talking about the hospital were built long time ago. But the population is going up, but it's still accommodate that many people that were built before 1960. The swimming pool that we're talking to Mayor, our swimming pool, it was from before 1963. That swimming pool is bad. The condition is bad. But you can't compare that swimming pool to other swimming pool. So we want to say that we need to do the research of each and every area, to go and check, not just giving the money to this federation, and not to checking that the money is doing the right thing. So it's just the thing that I want to raise, the money for the federation. Oh yes, Ray will add some other things that I left. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you for the opportunity for having us here. I want to touch on a few things, and I always start with the fundamental of every sport. It doesn't matter whether you're playing cricket, soccer, rugby, it doesn't matter. Each sport, in order to grow and foster change and long-term sustainability, we need 5 pillars in place, 5 pillars. The participants themselves, which is the talent, the kids and everyone else. We need capacity building, which is the coaches, the people that work with these kids on a daily basis. We need to look after these people. They're important. Whether they're teachers, they're coaches, it doesn't matter. We need infrastructure. Without infrastructure, a safe environment for us to develop our future leaders and everything, we're doomed, because weather will then dictate when we can work with our kids. So in June, we're just redundant because we can't take kids out in the rain. We need competition, a healthy environment of competition, so that they learn how to compete. But most importantly, we need to teach them how to lose first before they can appreciate their little victories. And then lastly, the fundamental important one, the quality of opportunities that we provide for our future leaders. That is fundamental. HOD mentioned something very important in any development in any society. We need to start them off while they're young. That is where most of our investments need to go to. Not that we're going to neglect those that are currently in need of our services and everything. Now, as the Gugulethu Sports Council, we're sitting there with other social ills that has nothing to do with sports, unemployment, high crime rate and everything. And we know as South Africans, sport has helped us unite a nation. 1995 World Cup. We hosted another World Cup in 2010. We're hosting the Netball World Cup. We recently have the Women's Cricket World Cup. And our question sitting in the townships, how do we participate in the influx of tourism to create jobs for our people, to help our government address the unemployment within the townships? We were recently told that some of these netball national teams that are coming into South Africa to participate are afraid to go into the township. Why? Without the townships, our prominent clubs, the Kaizer Chiefs, the Orlando Pirates, the Cape Town Cities, they're redundant without us on the ground because they depend on us for their own talents as well. So what we're asking here, guys, is equip us to do your job. Allow us to work on your behalf in the townships. We, the boots on the ground. And what my colleague here is raising is quite important because we sit there and we listen to people receiving funding, yet they're not doing the work. And we're asking, how is it possible that people are getting funding and no one is actually monitoring? We have to read in the news of people being given 10 million to host youth awards and not even a penny was spent towards the youth. Now, another thing we want to impose on the Western Cape Sports Council, what are they called? The governing body that is supposed to look after these sports. It took them 8 days to respond to our request to register with them. Unacceptable for a body that is supposed to be leading us. Someone there is not doing their job. We're looking at those things. When we hosted the mayor in Gugulethu, we expressed one thing. We said we're not looking for handouts. We are looking for people to partner with us while we try and solve our own challenges. Now, all these events that are happening, Formula E, they're happening outside the townships. And some people will act like ostriches and bury their heads in the sand and say, it's not my problem, it's not my challenge. What do you think once those kids have looted the townships and are done with the townships, where next are they going to go and look to loot? So while today it's not your challenge, tomorrow, I guarantee you, it becomes your problem. And we are here offering you solutions. We are saying we're not looking for handouts and sponsorship. We're looking for partners that will hold us as well accountable. If it means we are being audited each and every quarter, then so be it. But we want to transform our own township. And we can't do it without government being on our side. There are so many loopholes. For example, we're supposed to be applying for lottery funding, which is soon to be open. We have to find funds to travel from Gugulethu into town to come and apply. And we find it difficult because no one is actually helping us through the application. If lottery is meant for the people, how come there are no lottery offices within these townships, people that are going around teaching us how to fill in these forms and making it conducive for us to qualify for this funding? And not only that, but we are given monies and then we are left at our discretion. We from the township people, we've never handled millions. And what we're asking is join us in partnership. We will tell you what we need and you go out there and you just make sure that we have the infrastructure, we upscale our people, thus creating employment. And it's a model that can be replicated in every township in South Africa, thus allowing us ourselves to become our own solution and create a sustainable model. Secondly, with all these events that are happening in South Africa, and Cape Town in particular being one of the best tourism destinations, we really want to start addressing tourism within our townships, creating these mini events within the townships. We want you guys to force all these organizations, the netballs and stuff, they're getting 30 million. It shouldn't be up to them whether they're coming into the township to do clinics or not. We need to work together with SAP to make sure that our kids get to see their heroes, thus be inspired. It's disheartening to hear that we're going to be hosting a World Cup and there's a child that knows a Janine something from the South African netball team, but that lady can't come into the township. Unacceptable. We need to come together and say, how do we make it safe for these people to actually do come into the township? We're not politicians. I'm not going to take technically here, and I'm not going to be rehearsing a speech and all those things. We are the people that train these kids on a daily basis. We become a father, we become a brother, we become a counselor, and all those things. Within a space of 8 days in Gugulethu, 6 people were shot. And you know what's worrying about it? The fact that we're immune to that, we just get on with our lives. That is the fundamental one that worries me, that people don't even blink anymore. Oh, he was shot, oh, okay. Who's next? So guys, we're here to listen, to observe. We're hearing the budget and we're wondering who's holding who accountable to make sure that these things are happening and we actually get to do what we want to do. And another thing is Gugulethu. We want to open our township through the Sports Council to our fellow African brothers. We would like to work closely with the relevant sporting departments to see if we can host teams from Nigeria, teams from Ghana, so that we can address even the social ills of xenophobia and all those things. And when we want to do those things, you have to jump through hoops at SAFA. I don't know whether people do not see the bigger picture here or anything. But yeah, lastly, we would like for you guys to look into the process of application for funding. We, the average people, a lot of organizations within the township are not even registered. We do not know how to go about it. We do not know how to acquire tax clearance, how to acquire tax exemptions. We do not know those things. And that speaks to capacity building, to administration. You know, we need those things within the township. I don't want to come into town in order to access this information. I need it readily available so that I can get on with doing what we need to do. And that is to address our social ills within our townships. So guys, thank you so much. We really appreciate the fact that you allowed us to sit in here and observe and learn. And thank you again.
Thank you very much. You will notice that I didn't limit you as I would normally limit members of parliament, because we don't often have members of the public joining us. So I allowed you to go on for longer than I would normally allow a member. So that's just for all the members, just in case I get called out and they will say that I restricted them. But just on the last point, before you leave today, in the concourse of this building, there is a government contact center. As you exit downstairs to the left, perhaps just go in there and ask them for the contact details within the Department of Social Development for the NPO help desk. There is a dedicated unit within the Department of Social Development that comes out and assists with the training that is involved in the registration and management of NPOs. So that's the first point of call. And also to say, I know you guys have already met with the mayoral committee member for community services and health in the city of Cape Town around the upgrading of city facilities. And I know that there was a commitment by Councillor van der Ros and a timeline put in place for when that's going to do. And I know the mayor's also spoken specifically around the swimming pool, because that's something that he said is happening in the next sort of 22 months or so. So I'm glad that that's been resolved. But in future, all of our committee meetings are all open to the public as well. And you don't always have to come into town if you don't want to. We are on Microsoft Teams and we are on YouTube as well. But what I'm now going to do is I'm going to ask the HOD in his closing remarks to perhaps also reflect on some of those comments and perhaps also to share some more specific details around the Netball World Cup and the legacy projects and the infrastructure projects that are planned around that, because none of those legacy projects, as far as I understand it, and the ones that I've seen, are in affluent communities. So it might be useful to see that, because I think sometimes what happens here stays in this space and it stays in the Cape Times and the Cape Argus. It doesn't always filter down to community level. And I think we need to do more as parliamentarians to make sure that communities have access to the information that we have access to. And I can tell you this is one department. I've been in business and the NGO sector and in the public sector for a while. This is the only department where I actually look forward to reading the reports and the plans, because it's written in plain English. It's laid out in a clear and concise manner, and it's not sort of bureaucratic speak. There are lots of other departments in this government where you get a strategic plan or an annual report, and by the time you've read those pages, you still don't understand what the intent is. But DCAS, it's beautifully written, and in most cases, I know for our entities, all of those reports are available in all 3 languages as well. So you are more than welcome in the future to interact with this committee, and the colleagues in this department is also quite accessible as well. But you say you already have the minister on WhatsApp, so that's even better. So I'll now hand over to the HOD for closing remarks and reflecting on that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks to committee members and members of the public for giving us the opportunity just to outline our allocations for the year and also over the MTEF. And also just to give you a sense of our intentions and the environment that we're operating in, some of our constraints. Just a quick reflection on the inputs. There's nothing that I can disagree with the inputs that have been mentioned. It's our experience as well. What has been mentioned here is something that we've seen ourselves. And it is one of the things that informs our new approach, because our new approach is a partnering, a collaborative approach, and an approach that holds each other accountable. And where there are those gaps where accountability mechanisms are failing, that is where we need to strengthen. We are quite, in terms of the systems in place and the controls, we are quite comfortable with those because they are audited every year. But there will be a few that will always, come through that may not be to standard. And that is where active citizens like the ones you've seen today become very important as partners. DCAS works with partners. Everything we do, I mean, if you had to look at our COE, I mean, we only have just over 550 staff for the work that we have to do. The only way we are able to do this is because of the partners we have within civil society. That is the only way that DCAS is able to achieve some of the successes that it does. But as the colleagues have mentioned, it is with immense difficulty when you look at the lived reality of some of the children we are working with, the coaches we are working with, because those coaches live in those communities, and we get to see how big the task is. And you also then get to see how frustrated we get when our case is a very easy case to make. It is not complicated. Is that if you invest upstream, you're going to feel less pressure downstream, where most of the pressures are being experienced and are more visible. But there is this tendency of only focusing on what is visible. And that if you invested in DCAS, and it's not a lot of money. DCAS has been sub R1 billion now for a very long time. And you cannot compare provinces. I mean, we have a population our population is way less than KZN, the comparison I want to make. But the KZN budget for arts and culture alone is over R1 billion, you see. But they have a bigger population, so they get a bigger allocation of the provincial equitable share. But you can already see that their intentions are quite clear and they see the value there. And we need to also demonstrate the same, that an outfit such as DCAS is not fun and games. It is not fun and games. It's what you see up there when it's in the stadia, it's on the performance platforms, and you think that is what we are about. We are not about that. That is just a culmination. What we do is for everyone. It's not for those who have chosen to take sports and become sports people. It's not for those who have chosen to take arts and become artists. They are part of it, but we don't exist for them. We exist for everyone because we understand the fundamental role that sports, arts, and culture plays in holistic development of human beings. And that if we do that and we do that right, and make sure that Jane here is an avid chorister, and that when she leaves today, she's going to choir practice, and that's just because that's what she does. And that I cycle, and the truth is I do. But that's what I've decided to do. And we should allow everyone to have that thing that they do within the arts, culture, sport. Not because I want to win a race. I'm not interested in that. It's what completes my life. And that is the fundamental thing that we need to raise and get people to appreciate, because what you've heard there is what we've seen. It's what we've seen, and we don't know how else to make the case, Chair. But we thank you for the opportunity, and we thank you for the members and for the questions. Really, the questions that we've received today show that the members actually take the time to read through these documents and appreciate and understand what the communities are reporting to them. And we really appreciated that. And we also like to thank the Minister in her absence for the leadership that she provides, and the team and the staff that we have in the office and in all our regions that are doing all of this hard work together with our social partners, the federations, the sports councils, the NGOs. All of those people are assisting us to deliver on this mandate. But definitely, we cannot do this without your oversight. So thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HOD. We're going to do things slightly differently today. So normally we would kick the department out, but because we're not going to be long, we'll ask you to just stay for the next part so that we don't have to send you any letters, so that you have the recommendations, you've heard it. So if we don't get it in 7 days, we can just say, but the HOD was there. I'm just joking. Colleagues, we're now going to move over to the meeting resolutions or any requests for information that members might have, or any recommendations. Wasim is putting up on the projector the resolutions that we've already captured here from the table. Wasim, do you want to read them out, or go? Wasim will read them out, and if members can just take note of any additional ones or any ones that you disagree with.
Thank you, Chairperson. It's also the first time I read recommendations of the department here. With regards to the library services, provide an updated list of the rural areas. I don't know if I got this right. The Wheelie Wagons initiative is rolled out. A list of libraries with no internet connectivity and the timelines for fully capacitating these libraries with internet connectivity. I think there was a comment that there was a parliamentary question on this. So the members just have to indicate if they want the request to be sent to the department again via the committee, or if you are satisfied with the responses that will come via the other avenue.
I think if we're getting it already, we don't need to ask for it again. Nothing's going to change between now and next week.
Okay, and then also a breakdown of the funding allocated to the Lavendale Softball Club from 2019-2020 to date. And the department should also indicate if it supported the club through any other mechanisms, and if so, describe the nature of the support for the aforementioned stipulated timeline, a list of the federations that the department funded, including the amounts for the past 2 financial years, obviously with the current financial year, once you've finalized, consolidated that information, and then a breakdown of the funds allocated to or the transfers effected to SAFA for 2022-23, again, post consolidation of that information by the financial year end. Anything else from the members, please indicate.
Members, can I get an indication if there are any additional recommendations that you'd like to add or request for information? I see no hands. Those requests for information will then be reflected in our minutes. Member Kama?
No, thanks, Chair. I want to check. Sorry, what the HOD mentioned. I just did not hear him properly around but he mentioned something about the presidential stimulus package and funds around that. I don't know whether he was saying there are funds that they are going to receive from that. Because I was then going to make a request for information, Chair, as to how much has that stimulus package contributed, given to the department, and perhaps if is the HOD saying there is another coming, and how much will that be? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so we'll include a request for information on the funding received from donors, inclusive of the money from the Presidential Stimulus Fund. Okay, members, so because we are a very efficient committee, we do have a slot next week to adopt the report on our deliberations on the budget, but I think we can just get it done now because we still have some time left. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to table the draft committee report on the Standing Committee on Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sport on vote 13, Cultural Affairs and Sport. So that draft report would read, the report of the Standing Committee. Let me read on my laptop because I can't see that focus. I'm not wearing any glasses. The report on the Standing Committee on Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sports on vote 13, Cultural Affairs and Sports, in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2 of 2023, dated 16th March 2023, reads as follows: that the Standing Committee on Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sports, having deliberated on the subject of vote 13, Cultural Affairs and Sports, in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2 of 2023, referred to the committee in accordance with the Standing Rule 188, reports that it supports or does not support the vote. Can I get an indication from members whether we have support? I see Member Bartman.
Chair, move that we support the vote.
Thank you. May we have a seconder for that motion?
Here, I second that.
Seconded by Member Pretorius. Members, the report will then read that the Standing Committee on Community Safety, Cultural Affairs and Sports, having deliberated on the subject of vote 13, Cultural Affairs and Sports, in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2 of 2023, referred to the committee in accordance with Standing Rule 188, reports that it supports the vote. Member Kama, do you have an alternate view?
Chair, thank you. I think we cannot continue to do the same thing and expect different results. We believe we need much more money for this department. So in that, the ANC wants to exercise the option of Rule 90 to that the report reflects its minority view not to support the vote.
Thank you very much, Member Kama. So the report will then have an additional paragraph that would read that in accordance with Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress expressed their minority view not to support the vote because you're saying you want more money, so we shouldn't accept any of the money. But the committee has supported the vote, so we'll note that minority view in the report. Just give Wasim an opportunity to type. Colleagues, with that, the report is then duly adopted, and we will then circulate both the minutes as soon as they've typed up for us to adopt at our next meeting, where we will also resolve that we've opted to adopt the report as well, and that then concludes the business, the formal part of our business. Members, I just want to check, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like us to still cover? Good. So members, with that, I want to say thank you to all of you for making yourself available, especially for those of us who've been here for 2 days, and some of us will be here for the next few weeks. And a very special thank you to the department for once again joining us and also being able to answer all of our questions so comprehensively. A special thank you to the members of the public for joining us as well, and we look forward to seeing you at more of these committee meetings, and also when we discuss specific aspects as well. And we also ask you to invite us. We do a lot of oversight visits outside of the metro, but the members don't like visiting projects in the metro. I suspect it has a lot to do with the fact that they have to drive themselves there and they have to sleep at home. But we will certainly make sure that we do visit sites in the metro as well. And we do partner quite regularly with municipalities. So if there's, even if it's a city-related sort of issue, we work very closely as a committee with the portfolio committee in the city that focuses on community services and health. The meeting is then adjourned, but you are all welcome to join us in the members' lounge for lunch. Or before you go, sorry, the meeting is not adjourned. Member Kama? Is that a legacy hand? Member Kama, are you